Hey Jamie. Okay, so I'm out on a run, at which point, currently as I'm recording this memo to you, I am walking. There are cars driving by. You're welcome for the background noise. And it just brought to mind what you said in our last conversation about the same thing of like, I went for a run earlier this morning and it included periods of walking, and I decided to still call that a run. And first of all, yes, why not? But the thing that suddenly like clicked with me is it's kind of an issue. I don't know how broadly applicable it is, but the place I could think that it's absolutely applicable is in the place of work. I've been, on this journey of finding pacing that works for me when I'm in my like a clinical workplace and just with work in general, but especially there. And especially now, there's been this new funding change in the province in which I work for primary care physicians who practice in the kind of model I practice in, where we have to, in order to earn a certain portion of our income, we have to track and bill according to our hours, like how many hours we spend per day doing different kinds of clinical tasks. And so one thing about that whole situation that ties back into you get to call it running even if it includes walking, is it's the same idea. Like I feel the impulse, and I see it in many of my colleagues, that because you're at work, that means you have to be working all the time, or as close to all the time as you deem like acceptable. So yes, you're eating lunch, but you're eating it at your desk, and maybe you're taking a little break to have a conversation with a colleague or scroll on your phone, but pretty quickly you're back to it, and you're back on your inbox, and you're back in your charts, and you're back doing forms or whatever, right? So like work only counts as work if you're literally doing work. And now here comes this billing model where like there was this webinar before the billing model rolled out, and they were like showing what they, here's a typical day and how you would bill it. And it was like, see patients from like 9 till 12:30, and then 12:30 to 1:30 over your lunch hour, you're still calling patients. So you can still bill for that time. And then you go back to seeing patients in person, so you can bill for that time. And then you can do some inboxing, and then you can bill for that time. There was like literally no breaks that didn't include work. And now with this new model, I just see how, different incentives shape thinking. Like we were talking about the Substack conversation of like, depending on how you pray to the god of money, if you think that the only way in which you can honor the god of money is by earning money every single minute of every single day, I wonder if in many physicians' minds it's going to be even harder to take a lunch break, because now they'll know I'm not earning any money right now, which is like not factually true in multiple ways. And also, even if it was factually true, must we be every second of every day be earning money? Or else it's not enough. Otherwise we could have been doing more. You know what I mean? So this walk run that I'm just gonna call a run, I'm out for a run, and part of how I run and what supports my running includes periods of walking, includes periods of sitting down. Not today, but sometimes I sit on a bench and I'm like, it's raining today, that's why all the benches are wet. But like, it all gets to count as a run. When I'm at work, I'm in my clinical setting and I see patients, and then I eat my lunch not looking at any kind of clinical anything, and then I lie down and have a snooze, and then I play my ukulele, and then I talk to my learner, and then I do some paperwork, and then I see some more patients, like however the flow of my day goes, and then I go use the bathroom, and then I sit down and have a snack away from screens, even though my next patient is waiting, but I'm listening to my body and realizing I'm not going to make it through this next one unless I nourish my body. I can say I'm at work that whole time. I can say I'm even supporting my clinical work the whole time, including the times I'm not doing anything that I'm allowed to bill for. I'm not doing anything that from the outside people would consider work. It all supports the work. And even if it didn't, it supports me as a human being. And what if that's a worthy reason to do it? You know what I'm saying? So that's my insight. Now it's getting windy, so I'm going to stop because I know that really blows out the audio. That was my insight. I guess the very last thing I'll say is that I did read your absolutely beautiful reflection, and I don't know if you'd call it a eulogy to Crowley, but it included elements of that certainly, and it was just stunning and so beautiful, Jamie. So thank you so much for sharing that with the world and just sharing your love of this absolutely celestial being that you had in your life, your familiar. I just think that's just so profound, and it was really moving to read it. And yes, we have these beings in our lives that teach us, and we have to pay attention to the fact that anyone, any being, any circumstance in your life, they all do have something to teach you and are your teachers. And that was one of the many lessons that I really anchored myself in when I was reading your piece. So thank you for that. And now I'm going to continue my run, which will include as much actual running as feels correct for my body today. Okay, love ya, bye.
Hi, Joan. Oh, I'm in my office here at the end of a very beautiful and full and intense day. That is also a Sunday, so the end of a very beautiful, full, and intense weekend. Spent a ton of time outside, spent a ton of time in movement, a ton of time in connection and engagement, and I'm not depleted, I'm just full. It's that feeling of like, if I were to take one more bite of the meal, I would be, oh boy, I would not feel well. So I just finished I finished a client session about 30 minutes ago and decided to take a little breather before sending you this response. The first thing that came to me while you were sharing this reflection, which was brilliant and excellent, by the way, was the phrase that is used the world over in all sorts of like service-based jobs, whether it's retail, hospitality, et cetera, of which I've had many, like most types, not all, but most types. And you may be familiar with this phrase. I'm not sure, but it's a fun phrase. It's a lie, but it's presented as if it is true. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. And it's such a stupid fucking phrase. Like I get it on some level. I understand the heart of what is attempting to be communicated there, usually by individuals who kind of occupy, a position of being in charge in some way, and so needing to oversee the big picture of the running of the operations. And now that I'm a mom and I oversee the big picture of the running of the operations of the household, like I do understand the impulse to just kind of encourage is a gentle word, but to like demand that other people are like constantly on their shit, which is really your shit. Like you want their shit to be your shit and you want them to be constantly on it. because you are of the impression that's the only way this like ship doesn't go down. And I've been there, again, especially now that I'm the main person kind of in charge of the overseeing operations, 30,000 foot view of like how this puzzle works well for everyone to get their needs met in our household of 4 people, 2 of which are, yes, small people, but are like fully capable of participating. And that has been a learning curve for them. So I get it. I get the impulse, but I got to tell you, like my entire 20s, every time a boss or a manager said that to me, I wanted to fucking punch him in the face because yeah, sure. The simple math of if you have time to clean, you have time to clean is like not true, but it kind of seems true. Because the implication there is, like you were saying, like if you have time, it should be used, and it should be used unto these like productive purposes that someone else is telling you that is, you know, of benefit to them in some way. And this completely removes the sovereignty of the other individual, which again is like a whole thing of why I could never ever work for anyone else in my life, because I've got to have like that, the degree of sovereignty that can really only be achieved through like entrepreneurship. But yeah, that phrase and the environments that are conducive to using that phrase, like removes the sovereignty of the individual. It essentially implies like there's no trust in you. Like when you were describing it in your context, I'm like, they don't fucking trust you guys, but like they don't. Like the model is built on the absence of trust, and so the model can only be sustained through the perpetuation of the absence of trust in and of other people or another person. And that right there is like textbook definition of cultural codependency. So yeah, that's what came up for me. I just started laughing while I was listening to you share this because of that phrase. But you know, like I said, like I sympathize with the usage of the phrase by people who mean well and are just trying to like keep the wheels on and keep things going. And I wanted to share something that happened about 2 weeks ago in my family, which is that, so kind of like I said, like this has been a learning curve for our boys, of like, hi, you need to participate. Things aren't just like done for you. You are at that developmental stage, and in my opinion, past, which is why this has been a curve. Like you're past that developmental stage where like you are a part of the team of this family. And it's a programming update. It's like a hard reset, and they've been doing a great job with it. And there's ups and downs. They live in 2 different households, and their other household has its own values and determining, you know, I don't want to say rules, but like standards, expectations. That's normal. Every parent is going to parent according to their own expectations and standards. And so inevitably there's going to be difference. And so I really sympathize with the position our boys are in of like having to kind of like update the expectations within themselves and their expectations of the expectations like week to week. So, you know, we've been both clear and consistent, and also obviously degrees of like appropriately gracious about the process. And 2 weeks ago, you know, in the aftermath of Crowley's death, it kind of fucked us all up a little bit for a little bit. And that's completely understandable, but I don't think anyone was realizing that except for me. And I was just realizing it in this like slow simmer, low hum kind of way of like, I'm just clocking things. Like there was definitely a lot of like disruption in our rhythms in the household, particularly around getting the boys to participate without needing to like offer a ton of reminders with like increasing intensity because of the degree to which the resistance and like the not listening, you know, all of that is happening. And so it caused like moments of conflict between Ty and them, and particularly the older one, who just turned 12, which is like developmentally appropriate age for those kinds of power struggles. So our last night with them, every week we do family circle, and we got to do it around a fire this past week, which was like really appropriate. And we kind of share rosebud, thorns, and now an addition of stem with each other. So everybody shares like their highlights from the week. Stem is something you're proud of, in addition to rose being, favorite thing or a few favorite things. Thorn, least favorite thing. Bud, something you're looking forward to. So everybody shares that, and then we kind of talk through agenda items. And usually that's like stuff Ty and I have noticed throughout the week that we're going to like address and talk to them about. And there's always a discussion of like, did they earn their like $10 for the week based in, again, not so much like what they did, but like how. There's an element of like, how are you participating, and also how are you participating? And we were kind of like coming to the seeming end right before this, like we kind of do like a closing activity of like this like sound and movement game, and then the circle is closed. And so I brought up that I was like, I actually have an additional agenda item. And I essentially like facilitated this conflict mediation because I did not like the energy that was continuing to exist unmediated between Ty and our oldest. And so I just invited each one of them to share with each other what was difficult for them about the way the other person interacted with them over the past week, and what they need the other person to do differently, or what they would need the other person to do differently in order to feel safer, better, more understood, more received in the relationship. So they each shared, and that actually prompted Ty to take responsibility for some of his reactivity and apologize to our oldest. And our oldest received the apology, and Ty was telling me later that night, he was like, about our oldest, he was like, he was watching you so intently that whole time, just like enamored with this like thing you were doing. And, I really felt like he felt like someone was on his team. I mean, the truth is like his dad's on his team too, but there's moments in those power struggles where it doesn't feel like it. And so it wasn't just me going, Ty, what do you need him to do differently? It was also, hey, what do you need from your dad? Like, what do you need different from your dad? Because that matters here too, as part of the conversation. Your experience here matters. You are equally as valuable in this family unit. And as we were kind of closing that out, what I communicated to both of the boys about, first of all, I contextualized like, hey, we all went through a really intense thing this week. So it makes sense that stuff was a little off. I felt off. I think all of us just felt off. That's okay. Second thing, this is even more important, I think, was me basically saying what Papa and I are not interested in doing here when it comes to like tasks, responsibilities, participation in the home. Some might call them chores. We hate that word. But what we're not trying to do here is just shape the two of you into people who easily and immediately and always just like do what they're told. That's actually the last thing that we want for you and for your lives. We totally appreciate that you guys have clarity around the things around your preferences, and we also recognize you absolutely have sovereignty. Like many of these things, as we've told you before, are negotiations. Like you can totally tell us like, I don't like we used to do daily chores, and then we got feedback from the boys that it felt better to do them every other day. And I was like, great idea. Why the hell do we need to do these every day? So like, we're in negotiations with you guys, but I just want to be clear, like our agenda is not to make you into like obedient individuals. It is our responsibility as your parents to invite you and to actually help shape you into people, specifically men. Let's just say it, like specifically men who know how to pay attention to the things and the people around them, and then be able to like self-generate both care and action on behalf of those things and those people that surround you. That's why we're doing this with you. Like, that's why we continue to presence you through inviting you into doing that, into developing that skill. It is not because we want to rob you of your autonomy. That's not the point. That's not the types of adults that we want you to become. We want you to become the types of adults, types of men who know how to pay attention and care and act. And it seemed like it landed. I asked Ty later and he said it who knows to what degree, but the more important thing is that we keep presenting that as the alternative to just like, we told you to do this thing, go do it, which is essentially like, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. It's an attempted, robbery of one's own sovereign internal guidance system that one deserves and should be able to use as like the ruler by which or the measure by which they give their yes and give their no. Because I had those jobs, and because, I developed in the religious and familial and cultural, et cetera, environments that I developed in, which like they were all shaped around making sure I became the kind of person who just like did what I was told. And then I found my way to those jobs and so even after I was self-employed, even being someone who has been self-employed for 10 years now, the type of boss I was to myself for the majority of that time was this type of boss who was like, had this kind of like, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean, like person towards myself. And it's taken me about 10 years to undo that. And, through my body, because I knew what my values were before my like soma could be like, yeah, that feels safe. But it's taken me like 10 years to get to the point of like allowing it to be pleasurable, moving at a pace that feels, like you said, like that is supportive, supportive of my working, the resting and the playing and the creating and the connecting, the living and the nourishing and the meeting and the dancing, like all of that supports my work. It's like taken me so long to really believe that in my body and then let myself live that way. And that, feels very much like my work now in shifting in that way feels much more like a ceremony, much more like an offering. And so as we just had this conversation with Mouse about pleasure as ceremony. So that felt like this kind of bringing it all together, because that is the way my work feels now that I have undone that programming within myself. And finally, I just want to say thank you for your response, your reflection about my Crowley essay. It's really stunning to me. Like you called it stunning. I thank you. It is, that word feels really appropriate because I am quite stunned. The way it flowed out of me, like when the time was right and I made the space, created the ceremony. Ty is playing on a soccer league this season. And so he had a game. It was right after we finished recording. I went downstairs and I made some dinner and I grabbed a notebook and I just sat down and I started writing by hand, which is how I've known for a long time I want to shift my writing in the direction of like only doing it by hand. And I wrote for 2 hours that night until it was like 10 p.m. and I went to sleep. And then the next morning I woke up and like one of the first things I did was sit back down and keep going. And I wrote for an hour. I didn't overthink anything. I didn't move pieces around or structure anything. I didn't edit anything. That is exactly the product of 3 hours of just sitting down and telling the truth. And I don't think I've ever had anything flow out of me that easily, ever, that I've written specifically. So that felt really congruent with like what I was saying and how I was saying it, and that like momentum and the clarity I was communicating. So thank you for receiving it with this recognition of like the worth and value of both the product and the process. That means a lot to me. And what you said about, what it reminded you of about this idea of you can wake up at any moment because everything and everyone is offering itself to you as your teacher. Like, that is exactly what I wanted. That is exactly what I was hoping for from this piece of writing. I've gotten a ton of feedback from people that is how they've been experiencing it. And it's a delight to be moved through in a way that produces something that I believe in to this degree. And it definitely feels like, since writing that, like something like kind of like completed itself. I feel really grateful. So thank you so much. I love you. I would love to hear, and inevitably will hear, more from you about all of this and then some. I'm traveling to Nashville in a couple of days, though not for work, this time for pleasure, in a sense. I'm attending a 2-day event that I'm sure I will share more about soon. But I'm just going to go get myself tended to instead of tending to other people in Nashville for once. It's going to be great. I hope you're having a beautiful night. I love you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Hey, Jamie. Just following my boys as we're walking home. So you might hear the background noise of them, though I think they've just like totally sprinted home. And it brought to mind that I wanted to respond to your voice memo. I just so appreciate everything you shared. And especially the thing that's been sticking with me is what you were sharing about this beautiful ceremony and ritual you have with your boys and your guy, and the circle that you have together, and the rose thorn stem bud. I just am obsessed with it. I think it's so cool. And the story you shared, and it really, one thing it brought to mind was something that came up for me earlier today. I was in a therapy session and have been really continuing to investigate and understand and relate differently to the parts of myself that get reactive when other humans in my house get reactive. And in particular, I'm just like kind of curious to hear more about whatever you want to share, not about necessarily details or anything, but like how you relate to when Ty gets reactive in the direction of the kids. And because that is one of the scenarios that I have a lot of reactions about when my husband gets reactive towards our boys. And just to be clear, I'm never concerned for their safety or anything close to that. But it's raised voices, it's snapping at them, it's maybe you could call it a lecture or whatever, some things that I witness and wonder if they're, the most likely to land generatively with the kid. I have a hypothesis about that. And everyone involved is a sovereign being. And I noticed, though, that my reactivity of like freezing and just feeling so reactive myself, and at times has led to conversations where I'm acting in a similarly non-generative way towards Francis. Maybe this is a short voice memo. I just want to hear more about that, whatever you want to share. And if you don't want to share on this podcast format, you can be like, skip it and we'll talk about something else. But for me, I've been really just exploring, the thing with the therapist I was exploring was, how are all these other beings capable? Because there's this instinct I have of having to kind of come in and take control of the situation or manage things. I have these deep, painful fears about, if we get this wrong with these boys, what will happen to them? As boys, what will happen to people around them? So as they turn into men, I have fears about my boys turning into men. We could have a whole conversation about that. And how I don't want those to be the place from which I parent, of course, nor the place from which I relate to my husband as we co-parent. So I'm sort of on my own journey around that. No, I'm coming for you. Meanwhile, my 2 adorable children have been picking flowers all the way home. And you can live in these catastrophizing nightmares in your head that have absolutely nothing to do with the reality of what's happening now, certainly, nor even the likelihood of what may happen in the future, saying that. But this is a topic I think about a lot and was just in this therapy session about. And one of the points was just remembering how the capacity and honoring the journey of each of the humans involved in this, according to, their stage in development, the adult father and then the growing children. But the other thing was really noticing my own, as well as noticing how Francis continues to grow and change and has intention to continue to work on his reactivity over time. And notice his commitment to this project of figuring out how to parent in a way that's different from how he parented. And the fact that he's not doing that perfectly, is that such a surprise? A phrase she said is like, you can measure according to outcomes, or you can measure according to willingness. And it is useful if someone's, thank you, my love. Felix just handed me a beautiful purple flower. Thanks, bud. And 4 dandelions. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. These are beautiful. Yes. What if I honored the beauty that is still here now in the midst of the pain and the reactivity, and really give credit and notice the willingness to show up and parent differently, hey? Anyways, I'm home and my kids are here, so I'm going to sign off here and would love to hear more if you want to share anything more about that. All right. Love ya. Bye.
Hi, Joan. This might be the fastest I've ever responded to a voice memo. Part of that is because I have the availability right now. I'm actually leaving. I just left the event that I'm in Nashville for, and I'm walking back to my teacher Elizabeth's home where I'm staying. It's a little less than 2 miles away. And I'm currently mildly detouring so that I can stop by a juice place that's in the neighborhood and grab myself some liquid nourishment after moving a lot of energy. So I have that walk happening and still ahead of me. And because I just immediately have so many thoughts about this. Where do I begin? Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is that the main way in which I, quote unquote, deal with Ty's reactivity is by not primarily, singularly, handling my own system so that I am not undermining the father of these children in front of them. That's vital. It's vital. It's vital for appropriate development of children, and especially appropriate development of boys. Now, this is something that, yes, the evangelical church tapped into and communicated in their own way, which was often problematic, blah, blah, blah. And it's just fundamentally true about appropriate development for children. It is fundamentally true, as far as I believe, that yes, there is equal partnership happening, but there are differently expressed roles for the masculine and the feminine in that equal partnership. And this kind of ties into the second point, which is one of the ways in which I handle myself by recognizing the differences and how, yes, a moment of reactivity for him could cause a rupture that then can be and needs to be repaired on the back end, which is his responsibility. And I can, in private and in a calm moment in private, align him on that so that then he pursues that repair. So yeah, it can absolutely cause a rupture when he has a moment of reactivity. But what I actually believe and what I have experienced in my own experience of my own household growing up, and what I have gathered through the energetic signatures, maybe we'll say, blueprints, dispositions of what I kind of inherited in my stepsons, is that actually what did greater damage as far as their relationship with their father goes was the consistent undermining of their father by their mother in front of them repeatedly over and over throughout the majority of their development. And that's a problem because our household for the first year did not function because they did not respect him, because they were never given the opportunity to. And I saw that really clearly. And so my primary intention in stepping into this familial, this new family unit, this relationship that I have with all three of them, was to do my best to curb my impulses, to control, to take over, to undermine, to soften, to, even if I'm right, even if I'm 100% right in the moment, not interfering, because if I interfere, that then again sets the consistent tone that they don't actually ever have to regard, listen to, respect their dad. And so the second part of this that I was alluding to is part of me learning how to hold my center, let things play out, encourage in the background towards repair post-rupture. Part of how I've learned to hold my center in that way is by my ability, my honed ability to distinguish between what actually is reactive and what is actually just appropriate alignment from the father to the sons. Because, and this is something that came up in that ceremony that we had where Ty apologized to our 12-year-old. He also, in addition to apologizing, made himself very clear in the distinguishing between, hey, when I have to raise my voice because my consistent experience is that you are either not hearing me or you are totally ignoring me, and you've had lots of chances to presence yourself in my direction. There's that sounds like, looks like, smells like, feels like yelling. Maybe because it is. You could classify that as yelling. That is actually totally different than me firing off in a reactive moment in your direction, which is the wrong thing for me to do and is always the thing that I need to repair with you. And if I currently had the kind of nervous system that I had a few years ago, I would not have the capacity to be able to tell the difference in my own experience, because anything loud and sudden would register to me as dangerous, and so something that then I must intervene on behalf of in order to secure the perimeter and make everybody safe. But the truth of the matter is that it is appropriate for the development of specifically boys to be aligned in like intensely presencing ways by their father. And I hear there's something I really want to touch on in what I heard you sharing about specifically this fear you have. You said you fear your boys turning into men. What's really interesting is I fear my boys not turning into men. I fear my boys staying in a perpetual state of arrested development for the rest of their lives because they have not been fathered the way that they need to be fathered in order to be the way that intensely presences them to like appropriate behavior that impacts the people around you in ways that, hey, you have a responsibility here. You have a responsibility here. And like, again, if I was parenting boys, if I was mothering boys with the nervous system I had a few years ago, I absolutely would have had this. I mean, I don't think I would have done it. I just wouldn't have done it because my internalized disposition towards men, my internalized belief towards men was, I'm afraid of them. I don't like that. I actually think masculinity itself is bad. I actually wouldn't want the boys to turn into men because I fear men. What's interesting now is after doing a ton of work on my own relationship to my own shall we say, arrested development feminine that was trying to just like point fingers everywhere of like, oh, it's the men, it's the men are the problem, when I stopped doing that, I reconciled my relationship to my own feminine and simultaneously started reconciling my relationship to the masculine. I actually feel like astoundingly safe with men. So that's the thing too, is I feel astoundingly safe with Ty and with his masculinity, even, and sometimes especially when it is intensely expressed for the purpose of appropriate alignment, for the purpose of appropriate maturation to turn these boys into men. Because the view that I have always had of them since the beginning, since hopping into it, which I have a benefit in this area by being a stepmom. Like, I did not know them as babies. I did not know them as toddlers. When I met them, they were of a developmental stage and age that allowed me to more easily see them the way I have always seen them, which is these boys are future men. What kind of men do I want them to be? Because they're going to turn into men, period. There's no way around that. Although energetically, the epidemic of over-mothering in Western society is a huge reason why over-mothering and undermining appropriate fathering, and also fathers not taking responsibility for themselves, and sometimes, yes, their nervous systems, but also just like getting into their bodies and like anchoring into one of my clients recently told me that, I think it's Thomas Merton used this phrase, like men without chests, which is like men who like have no center and are just like squirreling around, like not knowing who they are. And actually like fundamentalist religion is a huge reason why that has happened to men. Anyway, we don't need to get into the weeds about that. But this like epidemic of like over-mothering children, and specifically boys, I think is an enormous reason why I don't want to say we don't have good men, but it's very hard for most people, most women, to find solid, stable, trustworthy, presenced, like truly masculine in all of the best ways, all of the best qualities of the masculine, true men. I said something in the refuge last night in response to Christy Lynn's teaching. My teacher was the teacher. It was amazing. And it just kind of flew out of me because she was talking about self-responsibility, because her whole thing is yoga of self-responsibility. And I said something about how in the process of reparenting ourselves, we don't just need to like remother ourselves, we have to refather ourselves too. Because so many of us were not fathered by our fathers in the way that we needed to be fathered. And the way that we often need to be fathered is more intense and is more of the energy of like, hey, I'm calling you into your highest expression right now because I know you're capable of it, versus the like, oh, let me save, let me rescue, so yeah, I have so many more thoughts even still about this, but I would say that that's my initial kind of scraping off the top layer of what came up for me while you were sharing. Is just like, it's all about a posture I'm holding in my body. Of course it is. Everything is. So all comes back to my capacity to practice restraint. So I'm not undermining Ty in any moment in front of his children, because the main thing they need for their appropriate development is to see their mother respect their father, to see that dynamic, so that then they can internalize my father is worthy of respect, so that then they will sit upright and listen and regard, not obey, but regard. And that's the thing that I experienced in the interaction between Ty and our 12-year-old and that's what I wanted to facilitate the most was, I'm not trying to get you to like obey your dad no matter what he says. I want you to regard him so you will move towards him in effort to negotiate something if it doesn't work for you. But if you shut down and he starts yelling, or if you start yelling, it's like this, now it's a mess. But part of why it's a mess is because they were raised in a specific dynamic that did not infuse within them any sort of respect for, and therefore trust in, the wisdom of, I could say authority, but let's just say wisdom of their father. So when they watch me trust him, that sends them a signal that he's trustworthy. And I can totally, and do frequently, pull him aside, after the kids go to bed, we'll talk and I'll be like, hey, about this, can we talk about that? How'd you feel about that? Do you want to? And then my hands are still off. I'm still holding the capacity to actually trust him to be his own, be his own aligner. And I've seen him, this is part of it, like he's got the reps in for like doing that self-responsible self-reflection and then moving towards repair after rupture, or just investigating, like self-investigating, like what did I do? Why did I do it? I've watched him now for almost 4 years, first from a distance and now up close living together. I've watched him practice that in the context of our relationship and towards his children, but most especially towards himself and the God of his understanding. So my capacity to hold trust in him, and then my capacity to like differentiate between what is, and here's the thing, you know how to do this already, because I know that you know how to differentiate between when your kids are screaming because it's fun and when they're screaming because something has just gone south. It's instantaneous. It's in the body. It's in the body. And so again, if we're working on our capacity to be able to that's the thing, we got to work on our capacity to be ever expanding our capacity to tolerate, like noticing the difference. And still, I think in both situations, like you said, by your own admission, your kids are never in danger because of your husband's reactivity. So you don't actually need to intervene for their safety. Your body might believe that you need to because of all these fears of their development, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the highest likelihood that they're going to resist their initiation from boyhood to manhood is going to have everything to do with whether or not they respect their father. And that's going to have everything to do with like how you hold yourself in regard to him in their presence. So that's what I think. Those are some of my thoughts. And the last thing I'll just say is that if 5 years ago me had heard a woman talking like this, 5 years ago me would have torn her apart on the internet. And that would have done nobody any good. And it would have been a complete waste of my time, and is a perfect example of all the ways in which I was resisting my own initiation. So there's that. Part of me is shocked that these words are coming out of my mouth, but I deeply believe them with such a strong conviction at this point. I honestly don't give any amount of shits whether or not it sounds similar to the religion I was raised in. I don't care. It feels like truth in my body, and I've seen it play out. I've seen the results of when I'm aligned with this and when I'm not aligned with this. And I like my experience better. I like the experience of our entire household. I love the way our household feels when I'm aligned with this, and I'm surrendered, and I'm holding my center, and I let it play out. So that's what I've got. Love you.
Hey, Jamie. Oh my gosh. I knew you'd cook on something if I asked you that question. And you were cooking. So it was really nourishing to receive, and makes a ton of sense. And I feel like I still am on my own journey of formulating what makes sense for not just my brain, but my body to sort of articulate my version of what you said. And I won't be shocked if it ends up being maybe the exact same thing you said, but you know what I mean? Like I hear what you're saying and I'm like, yes. And then like my body and I are in a beautiful dance negotiation and level of understanding of like what that looks and feels like for me. But it makes sense to not interfere with any relationship between parent and child, especially in a context where I'm not witnessing danger in the room. That's not what's happening here, you know? And I think the thing that popped into my brain, especially at the end, is like way back in, I think it was season 1 or between season 1 and 2, we did the Substack ones and we did one about COVID. And one of the things you said is like, I don't want to be afraid of people anymore. And I just think that applies here, especially, you know, they're people in my own house and they're people that I love. And it's like a male partner, a man that I love and that I do respect. And I see him on his journey of understanding what it continues to take him to, you know, to heal or to, do his own work, kind of like what you're saying. you're doing, like you're seeing Ty do, like I see Francis doing that as well. And I definitely see the harm in a swoop in, a maternal swoop. And I suppose there may be some households where goes the other way, but my experience and what I viewed growing up was also sort of the maternal swoop, and then sort of the undermining that comes with that, you know? And so I just really felt strongly what you were saying, and that gives me lots to sort of think and digest. So thank you. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of like processing and thinking about this stuff, and a bit of it certainly is, you know, practices and rituals that remind me of my sovereignty, which include pleasure practices. Speaking of pleasure in the midst of all this, absolutely. But I have found that those are the corners and the anchors that have helped me most. I had done this previous session where I was like kind of noticing how my nervous system and my body reacts in the face of even like a very minor expression of something on the anger spectrum, like impatience or frustration from Francis, and how I can still have quite a strong reaction, especially if I'm a bit under-resourced, which doesn't leave him space to, you know, be human, because anger anger's a sacred emotion, you know. And even literally, like, you know, if he's just has a neutral face and I think, oh, is he mad at me? You know, like that whole thing. And as I was exploring, finding new pathways within myself to remind myself of the sovereignty and power I have, irregardless of the emotions of other people. One source absolutely is the version of me that dances wildly at ecstatic dance. And, that's an avenue that I've discovered through, pleasure exploration. So kind of tying in the theme of the season, but also honestly trying other things, getting too fixated on parenting strategies, unhelpful, I have found, instead sort of tending to the creatures in the room, including my own creature self first and foremost, and then honoring the paths of the other creatures and really seeing, like, I witness a pattern of behavior and I'm like, not sure. The amazing thing is, especially as we're going along, we have curated enough, emotional safety and understanding with ourselves that the boys themselves will say, like, Papa, I don't like when you do that. And with me, Mama, why are you always on your phone? Oops. Whatever it is. So, the kids, not in a way that abdicates our responsibility as parents to guide them, but like our kids are also right there with us, co-creating this experience together, and like kind of like what you said about like there being space for negotiation. But one of the things that really is necessary is I think it makes total sense to be really modeling what like genuine, not like a respect. So yeah, genuine respect of Francis, modeling that for the boys. That respect not being my deference to him as in I'm a subservient to him, but each of us mutually respecting each other. Like that being an important piece bi-directionally, which includes my piece of that is me respecting him and his piece of that is him respecting me, right? So I really resonate strongly with that as well, for sure. So thank you. I knew you'd have an answer that helps, and that really was very helpful. So I think I'll sign off for here. Gosh, I feel like we've already had a wonderful conversation, and I'm really looking forward to our next real-time conversation, which will include members of the refuge, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm so excited for that as well. And sending you lots of love. So excited to hear about how this nourishing time in Nashville is going. And love you lots, Jamie. Thank you as always for sharing openly and authentically about what your experience is now, even in the face of you recognizing sometimes such words can be twisted or politicized in ways
that I have not personally found to be generative. And so, I'm here with you and totally receiving and appreciating what you're sharing. So thank you.
All right. Hi, Joan. We are back to my previous strategy of just pressing record and seeing what happens. I'm on a run, and this is the walking portion of my run, as we have established is perfectly acceptable. And even for me, I believe significantly enhances the experience, because when I slow myself down, boy, do I notice way more. And I'm noticing a lot right now, a lot internally, a lot externally. Some of that is because I am fresh off of one of the most just extraordinary sessions, bodywork sessions that I've had in quite some time, maybe ever. Just the degree to which this client got out of the way and just allowed her body to tell the total truth of what her body was needing to express and be witnessed and have received and held, was just oh my God, it was so profound. There was so much movement, so much sound. And, at the end, this client, they were there's parts of me that feel like I didn't do that right. And I was like, oh my God, you did that so right. You did that so right. So I'm feeling pretty high off of that. And also, in addition to that, just feeling the last few days since I got back from Nashville, I have been not feeling quite this high, which is why I'm so grateful for the nature of my work. It's so fucking presencing. It's so presencing, especially the hands-on work. I can't do it unless I'm presenced. And so it really brought me back to myself today. And yeah, the way I was feeling the last 3 days was actually fascinatingly reflected back to me in the way that my client was just expressing how she has felt the last couple days. So that always just feels really purposeful. There's a bit of a magic to me realizing kind of what I'm holding in my body. There's sometimes I'll have strange pains that'll pop up in my body that are not normal to my typical pain patterns. And then I'll have a session and realize, oh my gosh, the person in front of me is saying they have this pain in their body, and it's the same pain that I've had in mine. And so it was kind of that, but in energetic disposition, I have felt kind of retracted for the last few days. And a lot of that has to do with the experience I had at the event that I attended in Nashville. I got what I needed from it, and mostly it was not for me. It was far too stimulating for what makes my body, allows my body to feel most present and clear. And so it's quite overwhelming. And yeah, since I got back, I've just been trying to integrate, what the fuck was all of that about? Why did I go to this thing that was largely not resonant with me? And then as I'm integrating, oh, wait a minute, that's why. Oh, and also now this, that's why. Oh, and this, that's why. So that felt great and has required a lot of mental energy. But also we're packing up our house to move. But I also understand that some of what was going on with me was, in a sense, kind of preparation for this session with my client today, to be in a degree of resonance with her that, I don't know, I think allowed her body to trust me, but also the process that was unfolding for both of us more easily. And that feels really cool and really magical. The main thing I want to share is tying all of this together. like what we've been talking about in this episode, and even what we talked about in our conversation with Mouse recently. What I've really come to understand about why I went to Nashville and went to this event was that I needed a container held for me. Like the way that Mouse talked about, like, you know, ceremony is really just like a container. It's containment. It's containment. It's intentional containment. I really needed intentional containment around this life transition that I'm undergoing right now, not just like this intentional stepping into the role of mother, as I intend to open the portal to give the green light to my future child, like, you can come anytime. Like, we're going to do that like around May 1st. So there's that, but there's also this element of it too, of like, well, I'll explain by sharing a story. This event was for quote unquote female CEOs, and specifically what that means is like coaches, you know, that kind. So this exercise that we were doing was letting the other women in this small group observe your posture and your voice and like the gestures you're making as you are kind of finishing this sentence, which the sentence is, my $1 million idea is. And then, you know, either on the spot coming up with an idea for your business or articulating an idea that you have already previously had. And this was like at the end of the event, and I was like pretty exhausted from the whole thing by this point. And there was like such an intense part of me that was just like, God damn it, I have to come up with like another thing. I have to come up with like an idea for like my business, for running my business, for doing my thing. And it like, I just felt this like rage and this like exhaustion of just like, this isn't fucking interesting to me anymore. And I was like happy for everyone that I was sitting with where it like is interesting for them. Though I will also caveat here and say part of the reason why I was feeling that frustration is because I actually was like, I already have my idea. I don't know if I call it $1 million idea, but like an excellent idea and an idea I'm enjoying, which is like the refuge. Like that container is incredible. And we're, you know, in our next episode, we're going to hear from 4 of the people that were in this kind of mentorship container over the last 3 months and hear about their experiences. And so I was like, I don't need another idea. I actually just recently got one that I'm executing really well, like while I'm learning my way through it. But there was a part of me that felt like I couldn't say that, like I'm here, so I gotta participate in the exercise. Like this was one of those moments where I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, why am I here? I'm not struggling in my business. It's like a common theme of like the women who are at this event. It's like they feel stuck or they're struggling, it's like, I'm not struggling. And suddenly it clicked as one of the women was sharing, and she was sharing really beautifully, like really authentically. And it just clicked with me. And I was like, that's actually all I have to do is just share authentically. And I just kind of need to say all of this. And how that ended up manifesting for me when I raised my hand, I was like, I'll go next, is that I literally said, Joan, I said, my $1 million idea is that my husband makes $1 million and that I get to do whatever the fuck I want. And I just kind of let it land. And when I tell you that the energetic bodies of all 4 of these women in this group with me, in this circle with me, just like exhaled and relaxed in my presence, it was incredible. I didn't stop there. I shared more about like, I have been doing this for 10 years. I have been exclusively in charge of my own survival for as long as I can remember at this point. And I am so tired of having this kind of relationship to like, not just my quote unquote business, but this kind of relationship to my creativity. And what I really want as I'm moving into this phase of motherhood is to just like not set it all down and stop doing any of it, but I want to do all of it totally differently. And so honestly, what I've learned in the last few years, which is shocking to me, similar to what I said to you in the the last voice memo I sent you, which is like all of this stuff that I'm saying to you right now about, the posture to take as a woman regarding her husband, her partner, her male partner. Like, I would have torn a woman to shreds if she had said this in front of me 5 years ago. I essentially said that to this group, but in this context of like this idea of like leaning back, relaxing back is like, I support my partner, support my husband in his dream and his endeavor so he can resource me so I can be totally available to my child. And I don't need to keep the wheels of my business turning for survival. I just get to like, from a relaxed, fulfilled, satisfied place, like ideate whatever I want to do and then do it. And I believe that will make me $1 million, as it were. And like, that felt like what I went there for. The whole reason why I attended that event was like the containment of that, like the ceremony of that, of me stating that courageously, which sounds silly, but there's like a past version of me heavily judging me as I'm saying these things. And also I have no idea, as I'm saying it, how it's going to be received. And what is interesting is I felt the deepest part of all 4 of those women relax, but there were 2 of them who kind of like were noticeably having a very difficult time with me just stating plainly that my $1 million idea is that my male partner makes $1 million instead of me. Like, that was like, it was uncomfortable. And I get it. I get why it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me previously too. So, there was a lot that I felt like I wanted to share over the last few days, and just was all kind of like bubbling up, and did my best to make it coherent as I'm sharing it with you now. But I have felt quite surprised at myself in this like version of myself that is like this like authentic. This is like the most authentic expression of me right now, these days, in this season of life. And she is saying some shit that a very not so long ago version of me would have just been absolutely shocked by, even quite disgusted by, and like judgmental towards. But it is the truth that my body knows, is that like, that's actually what I want. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I'm going to get back to running on this run now. And I will see you very soon for our next conversation with some of the refuge participants. And I'm so excited. Okay, that's all. I love you. Bye.
This is Experiential Anatomy. Thanks for listening. I'm Joan Chan.
And I'm Jamie Lee Finch. Experiential Anatomy is co-hosted and created by us.
Amber Wyndham is the editor. Julia Wyndham is the supervising producer.
Senior producer is Elizabeth Wyndham.
Our theme music is Park Pier 3 by G's Guy.
If you have any thoughts, questions, or stories to share about this week's episode, email us at exanatomy@gmail.com.
Please follow, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember to join us over at exanatomy.substack.com.
Experiential Anatomy is produced by Windhaven Productions.